All right, good, okay, well, it's straight up 5 o'clock on July 23rd, the CRCRC meeting. I would like to bring it to, call it to order, and we'll start with a roll call.
Jay Van Bavel.
Okay, Dave Bench.
Duke Garwood.
Tom Farrell.
Very good, thanks. And let's see, we have nobody speaking publicly or have anybody sign up? Okay, very good. And public comments, I mean. And then, okay, we'll move right to the consent agenda. I know that the July 9th CRC meeting minutes are fairly new.
We put those in the packet later today. We had made some detail cleanups. It was a little vague. And so if you would like to not vote on those minutes tonight, and we can push them to your next one, you're welcome to.
Okay.
Or of course, you can still vote and pass them if you like, but we added a lot more detail into the recommendation language. It was just a little too vague.
What do you think? Have y'all had
Well,
a chance to look at
it
them?
was on the website today.
Probably after we emailed you guys, so probably noon or later.
I didn't see it.
Because I'm pretty sure I looked at the most recent ones. I don't know. It's all bolded. Is that?
There should be a lot of bolded, yes.
Yeah,
yeah.
I've seen the most recent one.
Yeah.
But
So,
I would, I'd just make a motion, there's no rush on it, so I'd make a motion that we table those
We'll
until
table
the
it.
next meeting.
okay.
I think, and the other, or we can do the Joint Planning and Zoning Board of Adjustment training. There's hardly anything in there, and it's pretty innocuous, so I would move that we at least approve those.
And I would second that.
Okay.
For discussion, I'd say that was I thought a very useful deal, and I thought Bryce did a really good job with that. So,
What I really liked was it featured the CRCRC and actually established what our role in this whole process is, which I thought was great. I think a lot of people don't quite
I was
understand what we're here for.
I was a bit disappointed that there were not more P and Z and Board of Adjustment members there, because I thought it would have done, it would have been a world of good for them to do that.
I agree.
And they would have learned that the city values them a lot more than they may think, because we did, over the years, we've given both the P and Z and the Board of Adjustment more authority to have a louder voice in what we do than I think that they thought at the time. So,
Yeah. I wish there were too, but it's that time of year, right? And so it was just difficult. But we have a motion and a second.
You seconded.
Any discussion?
I
All in
second.
favor, say aye.
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 Who,
I did.
yes.
Okay.
Who seconded the tabling of the?
Oh, okay. We did not take a motion on that.
you don't have to.
Okay.
To table, right.
Okay.
Well,
it's
yeah,
just-
I mean, it might be
Okay.
either a motion to pull that off the consent agenda or to table it. Let's just do a motion to be safe.
Okay, all right. Let's make a motion that we table the July 9th CRCRC
I'll
meeting
second
notes.
Just for the
Second,
record.
okay. We got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. There you go. Ayes carry. Good. Let's move on to the regular agenda. We have several emails that we have received here. The first having to do with, I think Jeff Ezel's comments from the last city council meeting last week. And a second from Alex Robinet, who is not going to be here this evening, that kind of went out to us and to city council and to P and Z. If Alex were here, I would ask her to talk a little bit about what it is that she'd put in her thing. And if you want to know what Jeff Ezel thinks, well, I would recommend that you tune into the recent city council meeting and you'll get an earful. So there's quite a bit there on that package. Is there, I don't know if there's anything that I want to talk about with regard to these letters, but if y'all have something that you would like to say, I'm happy for you to do that.
I've read both presentations and I don't have any comments.
the only thing, that I'll say, and it's not anything big time, but I think that, I would have preferred that we go back to P and Z before we went to city council. I know we didn't do that, and we voted on it, and it's water under the bridge, but, I think that would have helped smooth out quite a bit of that. But it wouldn't, would it have completely smoothed it out? Probably not.
Right.
But it would, I think it would help, but regardless, doesn't matter. But, other than that, nothing.
Okay. Well, then,
Okay, so,
if there's no other discussion, then I'll just move on, or,
I mean, I've gone over it, and there's a lot of things that concern me. But I'll just share one thing from a technical aspect, you know. He says, these examples that he puts up about flawed or flawless, yada, yada, yada. I mean, his whole basis of doing that was using what is available by City of Austin aerial flown topography, okay? And I'll just say, as a professional, a registered architect, if I'm working within a jurisdiction that requires a registered survey, I'm not using those aerial flown topos. You know, they're good for preliminary work, and if I'm working in a jurisdiction that doesn't require, you know, a registered survey, might be good using that topography set for our actual documentation. But, you know, to prove whether something meets or doesn't meet an ordinance or our recommended height proposal, you know, aerial flown topo can be a foot to 3 feet off easy. Okay, so that's just a terrible basis by which he's throwing out there these examples of approved, not approved, flawed or flawless. That, again, I'm just giving you that perspective. And I got a bunch of other comments, but they're maybe subjective. I won't share.
Well, I would say, again, like to thank Alex for everything she did on this, because she did a yeoman's task of putting all this together. And, you know, even when she was doing this, she would say, look, some of this I had to estimate the height, and we all went into that knowing that.
Well, she disclosed that publicly,
Absolutely.
saying that she had she worked with the best tools she could, but she did go to the actual documentation that would be considered official. So that's a little better start.
I think that if we had had the opportunity, if legal counsel had okayed our going through and actually displaying the documents that were being used for our checking, our data checking,
Mm-hmm.
I think that things could have gone a lot smoother, but that was kind of an obstacle that we did not see in advance.
Yeah.
And it hurt. It hurt us. I spoke with Alex today, and she said literally exactly what you said, dude. Same thing.
Yeah.
She said that what they used, you know, for ground truthing their checks, it's too noisy. You don't know.
Yeah.
Could be right, could be, I don't know. So,
So Dave, one other comment. I still cannot fathom in my mind that, that we couldn't use that data. I know the attorney said we couldn't,
yeah.
and which means we couldn't, but I can't see the rationale for that, because anybody that wants to can go look at this data. And if it's publicly available, it's probably a fine line legally, which I'm not a very fine line legal person.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can tell you, there exists an awful lot of work that was done on this that can't be shown, and it's a shame.
I know.
Yeah, so that's all I had to say about these letters. Does anybody?
I would just add one comment that, as a non-professional, but it was stated several times that the committee had a fixed agenda, basically. We took this one plan early on, and nothing was gonna dissuade us from that, and we didn't listen to any other proposals, and I think nothing could be further from the truth in my mind. We have listened. Now, we didn't implement all the other proposed things, but we certainly listened.
Oh, yeah. No, and we considered.
And I think that the committee and especially the height committee, subcommittee, did a yeoman's job and came up with the very best possible solution that they came up with. And I think, there were no nefarious motives involved in that.
Well, that, to me, I wrote that was hyperbole, so.
Well, I said this before, and I'll just put it on record again. This is the only time that I'm aware of that we as a city have gone through a height deal, that we've actually spent more than having two council members negotiate, that were non-professionals negotiate how to get there for that. So this was many, many, many times more professional of approach than we've ever used before in the history of our city. So,
Okay. All right. Is that it? Why don't we move on? I think I would like to jump to regular agenda item number 6, discussion and possible action regarding building height special exceptions. And the reason I want to take that back. Let's start with agenda item number 5, discussion of July 17th, 2024 City Council meeting, including CRCRC timeline. Now, there's only the CRCRC timeline associated with this agenda item, but I want to also bring up that agenda, or that packet attachment having to do with the special height exceptions. And in it, I want to explain a thing or two. As you know, I wasn't here for the last CRCRC meeting because I was en route back from our vacation up in the Northeast, and we were on the road, and I couldn't participate. And as soon as we got here, almost immediately needed to put together a packet for the city council meeting. So I had some personal things I needed to take care of, and then got busy to pull everything that I thought that we had talked about on June 25th, what was approved, and get it moved into a set of documents. I decided that it would make more sense to have 2 documents than one with the recommendations only, the other one having the recommendations with some supporting material. And got that off to Ashley, and frankly, I did it too fast, and I was sloppy. And it's my fault. If I had thought about it 10 minutes longer, I probably would have waited another month before we had gone in front of city council. But I did it anyway, and the city council meeting, well, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at what it did, but it was
so
interesting
it's
and
a
loud. And
full-length,
it was
full-length
loud and
film.
late, and had, Jay was there, he saw that first portion, and anyway, we got what we were asking to have approved, we got it approved. But it's not without problems, and it is this. Alec Robinson rightfully had pointed out that the wording on the residential building height definition did not match the definition that we had approved on June 25th. And the reason is because I pulled something out of a recent email that I thought was it, and I just made a mistake. The one that I used actually had a lot more detail in it, but before this body here, it was not approved as worded that way. So council asked, would it matter that much if we just went back to the definition as was approved on the 25th, and I said, no, let's go ahead, let's move forward. They were gracious enough to allow me to do that, okay? Then, that worked okay. The tenting recommendation worked well. The special exceptions, to my surprise, got almost no comment at all. There was, prior to the city council meeting, I'd had a couple of discussions with city council members who said we didn't have enough in there, not enough detail in there to actually get approved, but they were fine with it. And I think we can work on it some more and do some things, but nonetheless, that's how it came. Now, one other thing that I put in there was the recommendation that for foundation height, that we had agreed that we would go for the 6-foot foundation height that could be as exposed to the street or the right-of-way viewable, but it had to be covered up to about 30 inches. And I thought, I swear to God, I thought that we had passed that, and that was part of our building height recommendations, and I stuck it in there, and they approved it, but we had not. And it came to my attention yesterday. I got a call from Ashley, and she says, where'd you get this? Where does this, when was this approved? And so I spent the whole day today watching television, old meetings and everything else. You all look great on television, by the way. And, except you, yeah, and discovered that, we had, our building height, as it lays today, our recommendation came into being on the 18th of March. And since then, it's changed very little. Really, the only thing that has changed about it is that we have a special exception clause. On the 26th of March, the following week, we had a meeting where we went through what we had approved the previous week just to kind of sanity check it. And Alex had presented a number of graphics that proved out that what we wanted to do made sense. Although it had already been approved, the motions had already been approved. But it kind of underscored that we thought we knew what we were doing, okay? And at the tail end of that, we started talking about foundation height. And we talked about it for about 20 minutes and ultimately decided that we weren't really ready to register it. It was complicated. So what I'm gonna ask you all to go, before the next CRC meeting, to go back and look at the meeting, the video from 3/26, and get to that portion where we talked about it and just kind of remind yourselves of what was said. It actually was excellent discussion. We just decided right then and there that we weren't ready to go ahead and motion it.
So it wasn't incorporated in any versions that we've
It was
gone
not.
over?
I've seen it in versions, but not approved versions.
Well,
See, I actually did a cut and paste out of a version and put it into the recommendations that we had reviewed the other night. So it wasn't like I made it up or anything, it was something that we had already talked about extensively, actually.
So it wasn't in the version that went to P and Z?
No.
Okay.
It was not. I wish it was. I went back and looked at that too. I've been looking at a lot of stuff.
Well, if you'd have asked me, I would have said we approved it.
Me too.
I
So-
would have said I didn't know, because I recall the discussion, but I don't recall precisely that we
I
voted
don't
on
remember the
that.
facts on it, but if you just, I don't think there was any dissent, if I remember right.
Well, here's the reality. Everything was going groovy until we got to the April city council meetings. We never had anybody come and challenge any of the recommendations we had made, or that we were putting together in this room. And when the April city council meeting happened and we heard a considerable amount of pushback and all of that to our recommendations, I think it put this group into a little bit of a shock. And we started rolling into things about how are we gonna handle such things as
Nothing
severe.
Nothing shocks me.
Okay.
Please.
Well, okay. Everybody but do. But the severe sloped lots became almost the total focus of this group for a month. And for that reason, you know, a lot of what had happened before, it just kind of became a little of a blur, and we came into trying to resolve all the issues associated with what people were asking us to do.
So how do we fix the foundation height?
That's the next question. Okay, so what I would like to do, folks, is to put that item back on next CRC's agenda, okay? And go through it. Now, if we get this done, we can take it to city council next, and I'll mea culpa in front, and tell them, you know, I apologize, I'm embarrassed by this. But if we can come to some sort of an agreement then, as, ahead of the city council meeting, then we can present it to city council, and I don't see why it wouldn't pass.
Will somebody write up what the foundation height recommendation is?
Yes, I can do that.
And then we can go back to this meeting and look at the discussion and
Yeah.
everything. That way we
I'm
can
happy to do that.
come to the next meeting and have something written that we can approve or disapprove.
I'd be happy to do that. I'll take that on. Okay, so that is what happened. Now, I found out the day before the city council meeting that somebody had put an agenda item on there about a CRCRC timeline, that there was some expectation that we would be able to report on how much longer it was going to take for us to do what it is we're going to do. And the concern is, I think, chiefly around how much staff time we're chewing up with all of these meetings. Here we are, we're meeting every other week, twice as much as city council or P&Z. And, you know, it's a slow boulder to move. It's, you know, we're not racing through anything here. So, and we're pretty limited in what we're allowed to do outside of here. So the question is, well, how much longer? If we get this stuff approved, so I told him that I thought with regard to the trees ordinance changes and the building height recommendations, that was probably the biggest piece of what we needed to deal with, and that we would try to move more quickly through the rest of our items, and that I think that before the holidays we ought to be done.
I think they said January would be okay.
They said January would be okay, but let's try to try to do better than that.
I have a question. The city resources that are being used by this committee, are we talking about our meetings and associated, or is some of the public using up city resources, coming in and asking to look at plans and things? Is both? Okay.
Yeah, to be fair.
Okay. Is there any possibility that going to every month we'll be able to get it done, or we need to stick with?
Well, we're gonna start tonight, Jay. So, yes, I think it's possible. I don't think most of the things that we have to deal with now, I don't think are that controversial, and may not require as much attention, much detail, much depth as what we've put into trees and
I think
and
that's
building.
possible, but when you get to things like fence heights, you might start another.
Well, we'll test that this evening, won't we?
Okay.
There's, I bet we can get through it.
Okay.
I bet we can.
We've had a lot of discussion about fences, so.
We've already done that.
So
And
there is some possibility that we might go eventually to monthly meetings. I'm just trying to help, the city
I
out.
mean, it's almost August, so I don't know that y'all would be able to get done if you tried to do monthly at this point.
Okay.
I think I'd rather keep it to every 2 weeks, and if we get it done early, well, good for us. But if we go to monthly, I don't know. Puts us at risk, puts us at risk.
Just an idea.
That's a good one. All right, so there is the document out there, and it is the timeline. And on it, just see what I when I stood up at the podium and talked to the folks about it, we, and I wrote this without knowing whether or not it had been completed or not, but, building height and tinning looks like it's completed, or we may have a little bit of extra work to do, but the tree ordinance amendments, we've got those completed. That actually sailed through pretty easily. What is ready to be worked is lighting and drainage, and I know you all had some discussion last time about drainage and lighting, and I think we need to talk just a little bit more about drainage. The quick hits, I'm bringing the connecting driveways back up. I've had some think about this, and I do think that there's opportunity here for to get this passed, and for a good reason. There's the enforcement of our ordinances that I think we need to have some discussion around and make a recommendation about. Fence heights, as Jay was pointing out, what might be more difficult is a revisit of what can be built into setbacks. And this is kind of dear to Alex, and I think we need to have the discussion. I thought we kind of had it wrapped up, but it's kind of out again, and I think we owe her that discussion. And you all have recommended not to pursue FAR or impervious cover, and I'm happy with that. And I told this to City Council, and zoning by topography or the number of allowable stories. So, and they agreed that the construction site management, the allowable locations for construction fences, porta pots, and dumpsters, they were kind of handling that themselves. City Council has really been talking about that themselves, lately. So now, future deliverables, codification, which we're just about to start getting into, and the final comprehensive document. Ultimately, everything that we're doing here needs to be wrapped up and tied a ribbon around with all of our recommendations, what we talked about, what we think we ought to do, what we not think we ought to do. But essentially taking all the items I think that were covered somehow in the survey and make comment about them and put them into a package, and so be able to hand it off and say, this is it, this is the CRCRC result. So, and as it says at the bottom, get it done by mid-January, and Jay observed that. But if we can get it done before the holidays, I think that'd be super, just super. Does anybody have any comments about it? Is there anything I missed out on, or left out on all that? Within our charter, we're allowed to add things if we want.
We didn't have anything in our survey that we're missing, that people responded. I'd have to go back and look. It's been so long since I looked at it.
This business about foundation heights actually kind of was born out of the survey.
Yeah,
And it wasn't really a question directed at it, but we did have 27 comments, came out freely about things that are going on that people don't like.
there wasn't anything else, though. I'm trying to remember, and it's been,
I don't think so, Tom.
Can't recall.
I think I'll try to look at it by next meeting, and then
Well, the only thing is that there was a final question that got a huge response, and that was a proposal to have the city's, a plan sponsored by the city or private donations to plant additional trees with owner approval in public right-of-ways. And I think that in our tree recommendations, we said we weren't gonna address that issue now in this go-around. We wanna just stick with that, we're not gonna include it in this.
Well, you know, I brought up at city council, you know, recall in February, we had some preliminary recommendations. I went to city council and said, this is kind of what we're thinking, based on what we're seeing from the survey. And when I got into that suggestion, that we might want to do that, there was a bit of fuss about, well, you know, people are abusing the right-of-ways, and that that's not what they're for, you know, that they're all about utilities and being able to get access to whatever's underground and so on. It didn't look like it was going to get popular approval, but we decided not to keep it in the tree ordinance discussion.
Mhm.
I don't know whether or not, what I thought was maybe it'd be interesting to take this to the Parks Commission and ask them, what do you think about this?
Well, it's not just the parks, cause this would be on all right of way.
Yeah, that was two separate proposals in the tree or 19 was about planting commemorative trees, quote unquote, on city property, especially parks where the cost would come through citizen donations. This program is under consideration by the Park Commission, and I think they've abandoned it. They've decided just, I guess, the city's gonna pay for the trees in the park, and they didn't want to have, you know, plaques by the trees and things. So I think we can take that off our list. And but the planning in the right-of-ways, what we said is we did not include any proposed changes to the current ordinance to accommodate this proposal and may investigate further the practical and legal ramifications of this idea, perhaps presenting it later. That still sounds like we are gonna work on it. And so what I think we'd have to have a motion or something to take that off our agenda from now till January, if we're not going to.
I will, this has been around a long time, this
It's
concept.
super complicated.
And it does get, it could be very costly to the city, because then the city would be responsible for the maintenance of those trees, if they were in their right of way. And right now, if you drive through Rollingwood with all the rain we had, there's my guess is every street has got trees that are, is it 12 feet or 13 feet?
14.
14 feet?
Yeah,
14 feet.
14, and according to the door tag, 14 to 16, but I don't know where the 14 to 16 came from. But 14 is the ordinance.
I guarantee there's not a street in Rollingwood that's in compliance totally with that.
So if this is, this was not in our suggested code changes, but just a suggestion, and we could simply take it out of there by having a motion to remove the consideration of a plan sponsored by the city or private donations to plant additional trees or owner's approval in the public right-of-ways from the CRCRC's agenda for the next 6 months.
Is that a motion?
We don't have it posted. You can,
Okay.
You can put it up as an item next time.
All right, okay. Very good. Can we get that recorded in the minutes?
Is that in the, what document is that in?
In the tree ordinance recommendations,
So that was already approved by council, and that's already in the drafting phase, so I don't know that going back to that at this time, I mean, maybe it's something y'all don't continue to talk about, but it's in that recommendations document already.
not as a code change though, just as a
Right.
recommendation.
Right, and I mean, I guess at this point, it's in council's, council and P and Z's hands to whether they would do something with that.
Okay.
Okay, so then what happens? Okay, that's cool. Okay, so there's gonna be code change that's as per recommendation. And then there's a recommendation at the bottom, or at least a suggestion. So how does that officially get handled? What,
That's just however council wants to handle it. I mean, when they did the strike force document, there was a lot more in there than just the actual end recommendations. And they took and implemented as many of them as they could or were feasible. And I'm sure there was some other information in there that didn't get fully rolled into the code. And so that's just up to council at this point to what they would do with any recommendations that were not, something that needed to be codified.
okay.
Okay, so if the city council wanted the CRCRC to work on that proposal, they would have to come back to us and ask us to do it.
I would think so. They've approved that document and said, we accept that recommendation, and now it's up to them to act on that recommendation.
It's up to city council to recommend, to act on it.
Right. However that, whatever that process looks like
Well,
for them.
okay, well,
So they could tell us to act on it and come up with a better idea, do nothing, or tell us forget about it.
Or send it to another, like you said, the park commission, or something. Even I think it's kind of in their,
Okay,
discretion at this point.
thank you.
okay.
Done.
I think so, yeah. I might wanna talk to you some more about that.
Happy to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. All right. So that's all I really had to say about the city council meeting, unless there's other discussion that needs to happen. If you, grabbing a beer and watching it is a worthwhile endeavor.
Just one.
All right.
That's a six-pack.
Yeah, it might be, it might be.
What was it, midnight?
Yeah, it was, I think, trees didn't come
Two-day
up,
event.
trees came up at 11:30. Trees came up at 11:30. I think, we got into building heights around 10:45
And
to
I'll
11.
admit that I surrendered
But,
at 11:15
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
with no enemy in sight.
I will say that with regard to building heights, we have a friend and councilperson, Sarah Hudson. She was quite gracious in her comments after they had approved our recommendation, so, building height recommendation, so. So let's move along to special, or regular agenda item number 6, discussion and possible action regarding building height special exceptions. And I put this on there because a couple of city council people contacted me prior to the city council meeting saying that what we had proposed was too thin. It wasn't specific enough. And those of you who had attended the training know that it really isn't. That the special exceptions really ought to have a certain amount of specificity in them. I thought that I would, but during the city council meeting, it didn't come up. Nobody seemed to express any kind of problem with it, but I thought, again, having written this agenda before the city council meeting even happened, that maybe we have some special exceptions that we need to get into the code. Is there any thinking on this besides what we'd already done?
Well, I would wonder if we could do that by not reinventing the wheel and looking at other people that have a height limitation and with special exceptions, what their special exceptions are in other communities.
The only other one I know, Jay, is Westlake Hills, and they have a special exception of if your lot has a 25% slope, we'll give you 3 feet of additional height. That's the only special exception I've ever seen on building height. Oh, excuse me. And then the city of Austin, for lots that are in a floodplain or in a drainage easement, there is the potential there for an additional, I think it's 3 feet over their maximum height. And I don't know why they even do that. No explanation in the code that I could see.
Those are the only ones
So
looking
I saw.
around.
Most places don't do it. They don't, this is how you do it. This is how you do your building height and that's it. You
So
don't
what
get
we
to
have
argue
right
it.
now is, you can get a special exception from the Board of Adjustment, right?
That's it.
With the usual criteria, right, that it,
You know, the way that it reads, is, and we, should the slope of a lot be so severe that the requirements proposed above have extreme adverse impact on the lot, this must sound familiar. An owner may seek relief from these requirements by special exception granted by the Board of Adjustment. Although not required, letters of agreement from adjoining neighbors will be given due consideration. That's it.
Is that the latest wording? 'Cause
Yeah.
that's- Okay.
That's when, you remember you came over and visited?
I know, but every time I keep printing one out, it says render the lot unbuildable, so
Oh, that's the old one. That's,
It is the
that's
old
what this one replaced, yeah. This was the one that got approved,
Okay.
all right?
Can't manage to print
That was
one.
actually, whenever we met,
No, hey,
you
that's
had your
what it
little
should
cut
be.
and paste on there.
That's
Yeah,
what it should be.
that was it, right. Thank you, by the way.
Well, that made Ryan Clinton happy, I'm sure.
Duke set me straight. It wasn't unbuildable, couldn't be unbuildable.
No, we kicked that one around.
Yeah,
Duke has already built on unbuildable lots, so know that for a
Been there,
fact.
done that, yeah.
that's right. That's the thing.
That's another thing, it was stated that 5 feet across a buildable lot area, stated like that was some kind of extreme number. That's a flat lot, just to let you guys know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it seems the city council didn't ask us for more specific special exceptions, except for some communication you've had with one or two members. I wonder, do we really have a charge to start making all kinds of
I-
special exceptions?
Well, this is, remember, they have right now, if somebody gets turned down because of height, they have the right to go in and request a special exception, period. And there's no guidance whatsoever to the Board of Adjustment. So, we would be, in my opinion, it'd be smart for us, I like this wording, because I think it gives some guidelines for them. And remember, they can ignore, they can make it be whatever they want to be honest. But this gives them at least some guidelines to go by. And I think that'd be, what I've seen of in the Board of Adjustment, when you give them guidelines, you're coming out better. We would come out better.
But do you think we need it to be more specific than what's currently
I don't
in
know
there?
how you.
Like
no,
3 feet for,
I don't think you can do it because I think that there's so many different lots. I think this gives them some guidance to go with on that.
To know it when you see it.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard to guess
Yeah.
what those numbers are gonna look like.
I also think a good time to handle this would be with legal as they're doing the drafting, because
Yes.
they, they're familiar with what they believe is enough detail to have as a special exception and what would not be, because they're very into having, objective criteria. And so at that point, we could talk to them about it. And I know you have later on your agenda to talk about the drafting phase and being involved. So I think at that point, that's something, though it would have to come pretty quick because it needs to be drafted by the September, I think they said September 4th is the joint public hearing. But I think that's a good time to talk about that with legal. So.
Very good.
Good wording, though. I like this wording, frankly.
Very
'Cause
good.
I think
I
that
think it's
gives
enough.
everybody the right to go in, but, and gives some, I think it's enough. If you're too specific, you're gonna have to do one for every lot that you
Right.
have on that. So it's better to keep it a little.
Fair enough.
uh,
Well, yep. Appropriately vague. Okay.
I mean,
You like that?
yeah,
I'm fine with that.
my thought would be after a few exceptions might come before the Board of Adjustment, then you see this consistent pattern, then there might be something described more specifically. So they know that particular item is gonna be addressed.
Establishes precedent,
Yeah.
right. That's a good point. It's a good point. Of course,
Board
we won't be in existence any longer.
Board of Adjustment should not establish precedent on each one.
Well, they can have made an approval
Yeah,
based, and recognize that they have a similar one coming down the road.
yeah,
Yeah.
So, anyway,
okay.
again, I put this on the
I like it.
agenda, okay, I put this on the agenda without knowing whether or not we would get approval or anything, but it's an agenda item, I wanted to discuss it. I'm happy with this way this is too, it's fine.
So I'll make a motion that we approve this wording for the special exceptions.
I don't,
It's
I don't think
already
you
in
even
there.
need to do that. It's,
Well,
it's,
I don't have to.
it's approved.
I'll withdraw
it's already done.
my.
I think we're there. See?
There we go.
See? We're gonna make the holidays.
That's what we're
It's
trying.
coming. We're doing all right.
I was just gonna go ahead and make my deal just in case we needed it.
All right.
Usually Ashley will jump up and say, you need a motion.
All
Well,
right,
she says it's
okay.
nicer than that,
All
but,
Okay, let's make it a little tougher. All right, I'm gonna move on to agenda, unless there's any more discussion around that. I'm gonna move on to a regular agenda item number 7, discussion regarding next steps for drainage recommendations. Now, I've eagerly watched the television presentation of the last CRCRC meeting, and I was delighted with how it went. But there was some discussion, and I agree that, FAR and impervious cover needed to come off. And I'm glad you guys voted to do that. Now, what you had done with drainage was said that you can make a recommendation to the city that they need to have an engineer look at where we are today, and looking at the DCM, the Drainage Criteria Manual, is it doing what it was intended to do? And if it's not, then what might they recommend that might improve it? And I think that's all groovy, that's great. Now,
well, there was 3 things. The last one was, is the monies that's being spent on these drainage criteria manual the best use of those funds?
exactly, good, yes, sir. Thank you, you're right. Okay, now, what wasn't discussed, there's 2 things. We had said that we would discuss whether or not drainage would have any impact on building height. We kind of kept that as a placeholder in our building height recommendations. That at least one person had come to the podium a couple of times and said that, that sometimes if you find yourself in a
Drainage easement.
yeah, in a drainage easement, or worse yet, a flood zone, that you might be able to get some relief in terms of a couple of feet of additional height. Now, the thing about flood zones is that they change. That every few years, the Geologic Survey or somebody goes out and surveys and says, things have changed and we're getting more rain, and so a 100-year flood is now this big. So I can see how somebody could find themselves on the banks of something that didn't used to be in a floodplain, and now they are. Do we want to do anything with that?
Well, I have a concern in that if your structure doesn't, if you're not careful as a city and you allow people to build in a floodplain, we can get crossways with the flood insurance people, and we can't get flood insurance for anybody in their city. So you have to be somewhat cautious about, that's a legal deal that we just have to be very careful about.
Aren't we discussing, though, whether there'd be some height allowance, given that part of your lot is in a drainage easement or a floodplain? Not necessarily that you would build on that.
Yeah,
But-
yeah, and that, but I'm just saying, it does change, and when it changes, we have to be careful about allowing building in a floodplain. If the floodplain changes, they don't let you say, gee, I built half this house and I'm adding to it. That doesn't work if you're doing that. Now, if I had to do this ideally, and I thought about this when we were just talking about the special exceptions on height, we could add the drainage exception to the slope exception. We could have we could put that in the special exception deal, because a lot of people have drainage easements that do not really impact the buildable area of their lot. And I would hate to have us do something and allow extra height when it really wasn't warranted on a lot. Does this makes sense.
Well,
kinda wandered
let's talk a little more about it. Here, I have a question, and maybe you folks are more knowledgeable in this area than I am. That I don't know why additional height is merited. Is it about putting something on stilts? Or something that, somehow accommodates water rushing by you? I mean, what is the reason we would increase height having to do with drainage?
Well,
Where
there's
is that?
two reasons I can
Yeah.
think of. One
Yeah.
is exactly like you said, if it's to keep a living area out of the floodplain. Okay, so you may have to go up higher than you normally would. The other is if you, as the drainage area increases, then that diminishes the building area of that lot on that, and we shouldn't have, and I could see the fairness issue about that, of saying, okay, you want X amount of feet, you can't build it on 1 story or 2 story or whatever we have, you have to go up.
Are
to
there,
do that.
are there drainage easements now that extend into the buildable area?
Yes.
Yeah,
There is, okay.
and
I mean, in
it's
the
not only the
particular-
drainage easements, but it's the drainage, floodplains, or floodplains, not drainage, but just a floodplain, cause they do expand.
They do.
The easements really don't expand, but the floodplains do.
Could you explain exactly what a drainage easement is?
Well, we have a few, we do have a few, creek areas
Mm-hmm.
that we actually built culverts and, have concrete, drainage areas.
Sure.
We didn't do very many, but we do have a few.
Mm-hmm.
And on those, we have an easement there.
Okay, the easement is for the city, is that
That's
right?
correct.
Okay, so that the city can build what they need to do to divert water the right, whatever it is they think they should be doing, okay? And is that like something that, that the city comes and pays you money and says, we're gonna take a piece of your, how does that work?
Well, if I wanted to go get it,
Yeah,
if I wanted to condemn it,
mm-hmm,
there's a whole process you have to go do that. The
Okay.
first thing you have to do is sit down with you and say, look, we need this to protect houses downstream.
mm-hmm,
And so by doing that, we're gonna pay you X amount of money.
Sure.
Either you agree, you don't agree. If you don't agree, we go to, you hire, condemnation attorneys, and, I mean, that's a whole different animal.
Yeah.
All right, but, most of what we have today, has been there for God knows how long. I don't even know, I'll be honest, some of these, I'm not sure that we actually have a physical easement.
mm-hmm.
They may have just done this over the years.
It has to be platted
Well,
and.
Look, if a subdivision's platted, there could be drainage easements that are prescribed because somebody really
Yeah.
analyzed the drainage.
Mm-hmm.
And there could just be blanket drainage easements because, hey, they just think that's a good practice. And some of those blanket easements, they get vacated over a time. There's, I know where we've gone in and requested vacation because in the end, there's absolutely no sense to a drainage easement.
Yeah.
But typically it's by plat, whether it's by subdivision or even if it's a singular lot, okay? Because that,
And then the third way is that back in the day, the city just did it.
yeah,
And
but
are
that's
those
because you
in the
analyzed
survey?
there was a need for that drainage easement.
But a survey's done showing that
Yeah.
here's a legal easement on our property.
I'm telling you, I'm not gonna tell you that every one of these things that you look at and go, okay, this is a drainage easement, is a legal drainage easement, Jay.
Really?
Some of them are just that we're done. Remember,
And-
some of our original lots were sold by going, Jay, we're gonna sell you from that tree to this rock over here and out to the street. And you built a house in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And
So what I'm hearing is that if the city decided that it's a possibility that, well, maybe a long time ago, before,
we do
they
have
decided
some.
that there was a possibility that they would need to use this space in order to build conduit or whatever it is they're doing, that there's an easement there now, okay, and everyone knows it's there, okay. Now, why would that be a reason for someone to get additional building height?
Well,
He
what I'm-
just said it earlier.
the water,
Yeah.
the water may not now be currently staying in that easement.
Right.
That's the first thing.
That's the reason, okay.
All right, the second is that there's a floodplain there, and the floodplain
Yeah.
has
It
expanded,
has, yeah, okay.
over time.
So you're saying that the drainage easement effectively defines a floodplain to some extent, the existence of a floodplain?
No, doesn't
No?
have anything to do with
Doesn't do that,
floodplain.
okay, all right,
Look, a floodplain is gonna be FEMA
right.
certified, that's gonna be a federal thing. And
Okay.
like you say, yeah, the floodplains have changed, you know, what's referred to as Atlas 14
Okay.
by the city of Austin. That's happened in the past 3-4 years.
Okay.
So that whole new floodplain study is out there and engineers work by that, okay? But a drainage easement doesn't necessarily mean that's a floodplain.
Okay.
Can
Okay,
you
and
legally now
look-
build a house on a floodplain?
Well, you can build over a floodplain if you determine the elevation of that floodplain, and typically the requirement is you gotta be 1 foot above it, and whatever structure you put in the floodplain can't, you know, you can't displace the volume
That's right.
of the floodway.
There's a clomer, is that the word?
I don't know.
There's a term that's used on that. We had one of the buildings on BK's Road
Yeah.
that altered the floodplain, and they had to go to the Corps of Engineers, to FEMA, good God, LCRA, you know, I don't know who else.
Everybody.
Yeah, everybody, to get this little change.
But if a floodplain is mapped currently and on your lot, part of it is floodplain, you know that when you buy that lot or when you buy that house
Okay,
that's on
so-
that lot.
Jay, the respondent, you know, Amy Patillo, she was the one that brought this up twice, I guess. That lot that she's on, that drainage way was originally an easement. I'm not sure, but I think it's probably a floodplain now, okay? And that may have happened before they bought the lot or after they bought the lot. I
And
don't,
floodplains grow based on the feds saying,
Yeah.
they may be saying, okay, the original, when I bought my lot, the floodplain was 5 feet. Now it's 40 feet.
Okay,
They just,
I
and
see.
it's a side yard setback, and that drainage easement for sure exceeds a 10-foot setback. So they are, you know, I mean, again, I'm kind of arguing for, but yeah, they're disadvantaged by that
and,
situation.
you know, that doesn't mean that there was anything on the lot when you bought the property.
No.
In fact, you could buy one of the lots on my street, Park Hills now, on the downward slope from Ridgewood, and ultimately, you could end up with a floodplain coming down off of Ridgewood through the middle of your lot.
Okay, I can understand that now about, thank you for the explanation about floodplains, but a drainage easement is on your survey,
Yeah.
right? When you buy the lot, if it's empty, or when you buy the house that has drainage easement on it.
The only
So-
difference is that easement may have been put there and it might have been 10 feet wide, okay? And it filled up full of water at 10 feet at that time. But because of the development in this area, now the water exceeds that easement. And it's going on both sides of where the easement is. The effective easement now is much wider.
But that's only effective, it's not what's on the plat.
It's not on the plat, but
Yeah.
it still
Well-
affects, you can't build on
So-
it. I mean, if you know water comes X, Y, Z, you're not gonna say, well, hell, let's just build a bedroom there anyway,
Yeah,
if you have any sense. I think the easy answer on this, in my mind, is to say, is just like we did with the slope lots, to say, if you have a floodplain or a drainage easement, then, and use similar wording, you get a
Headers.
special, you can take this and get a special exception on height.
You
and
can
what would
apply
that,
for a
and what
special
would that be? How much height would that be?
Well, I'd leave that up to the Board of
Okay,
Adjustment.
Keep it, keep it open. That's it.
That's it.
We'll just tack that on to the, okay, here's my
I would
point.
do it as a
Here's- here-
separate deal to the slope.
All right, now, this is our we have our CRC recommendation on slope, and we stick below that a drainage easement,
That's right.
floodplain thing, other special exception.
Yeah.
Second,
Second special exception.
okay, all right, okay. Questions answered. That's first thing. Okay, this didn't get any discussion last time, so I want to make sure it got discussion this time. All right? Now, second thing.
I
We
mean,
sit,
we,
okay,
I'm just, hey, we did start to make a recommendation to adopt a special exception based on extreme slope and also with drainage easements. So it's kind of a combo, but we did have that discussion
okay.
with Brian last time.
Yeah, I would
Alright.
prefer to have these as separate deals,
Yeah.
because I think what's gonna end up
Okay.
happening, I'll be honest, if you think the process, this is up your bailiwick,
Okay,
if I'm gonna build in a drainage easement floodplain area, city's looking at it, my lender is looking at it, and they're not gonna let me, do that, regardless of what the city says. Even if I can do it and it still shows up on the survey as being in the floodplain area, they're not gonna make a loan on that house.
but I might be self-financed.
Could be.
Yeah, I might be.
But if you apply for a special exception for height based on being in a drainage or floodplain area, the Board of Adjustments could give you 10 more feet,
They could.
15 more feet.
We could put a limit on it, Jay. I don't have a problem with that. I think really, I'm gonna tell you, my guess is we're talking 2 or 3, 4 houses maybe in Rollingwood. What do you
Sure.
think? Am I too low?
No.
I don't think, I think, and that's it.
Jerry, you want some more height? He's got a drainage
You
easement.
got one of them? Yeah. Well, regardless, even if it is only 2 or 3 or 5 houses or lots, I still want to be able to address it somewhere in our recommendations. And if it's not part of the drainage recommendation and it's part of the building height recommendation, that's fine.
No,
But it didn't get fully vetted.
I keeping it separate's totally good.
Okay. The second thing in here. It's gonna be a second, we're gonna have to go to city council.
Special exception.
We're gonna have to go to city council and tell them we wanna do this, all right?
And I'll tell you, if you wanna if you wanna
But it's
think
not
about
gonna
what
be
the
under
wording's gonna
building
be,
height.
Bryce is gonna put the damn
Yeah,
wording
well,
in there
yeah, well.
anyway.
Okay, I got
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
well,
just a separate.
He's not necessarily
It's
going to put
the
a height
second-
restriction.
Another
in it.
paragraph right here.
Yeah.
You think Bryce would put a height restriction?
I think he would have that discussion with whoever, with the people helping draft. I would think, yes, I would think this council. would-
City of Austin's 3 feet.
Then,
You get an extra 3 feet. I don't know what you're supposed to do with that 3 feet, but that's what it is, 3 feet.
take you out of the,
Maybe, okay, I guess, I guess we're hillier than most of Austin is, I guess.
actually, I think 3 feet would probably take care of all these out of the,
Well, we can float it. We could float that.
Okay, so
I'd feel better with 5 feet, but that's okay.
up to 5 feet.
Is it
That's what I'm
5
saying,
feet?
up to
Okay.
5.
so we
All
actually
right.
need a a motion, don't we,
Yes,
to?
we do.
I'll try, you're gonna, cause she's gonna come back and say, what'd you say? I'll make a motion that we, incorporate under item number 7 and in regard to item number 6, that, we have a special exception, provision that allows the Board of Adjustment to look at adding up to 5 feet where there is a significant drainage issue that results from either a floodplain or a drainage easement. I'm not gonna be able to say that to you.
Well
Kinda-
said.
I kinda like it.
It's a good start.
I have a second.
Second, okay, we've got a motion, we've got a second. Is there any further discussion around this?
I would just want to ask, the word, and probably, the word significant is, you know,
We'll get into the codification.
okay.
Why don't we do that, okay?
We could call it extreme adverse.
Extreme adverse. Those words, they do have a certain ring, don't they?
Maybe for consistency, it
For
would sound
consi-
good.
That's
Okay.
fine, we could do that.
We'll make that.
Would
as
you
a-
amend that
I'll
to be
amend that.
extreme adverse? We good with that?
Sure.
Okay, all right.
I'll
We amend
accept
that motion?
I'll
Are we,
amend-
do we capture that? Are we all right?
Great.
Okay, here we go. All right, we have a motion, we have a second. Any additional discussion?
I'm sorry, who was the second on that? Yeah.
Jay was the second.
Jay.
Jay, right. Okay, all right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes carry, 4-0. See, we're gonna make the holidays, kids.
Jerry, that
Now,
new
my
addition
next thing
just
about,
got 5 feet.
but, about drainage, all right? Y'all said stuff. Okay. This is what I want. This is gonna prevent sloppiness. What I want is whoever was the lead in the drainage recommendation to write something. I want
Brian
a
Ryder.
document
Brian
that says, this is what we recommend.
And
Call Brian. and
You
Jerry.
got, okay, this does not go before city council until we have a document that says what we said or what we think it is.
And I have a question about that.
Okay.
At this point, do you want to try to incorporate more of these into one package rather than continuing
that
to
was the whole-
submit
that-
individually? or-
Actually, that's the whole point, is that literally all of these things become chapters in a larger document. And they'll probably need some tweaking and stuff just for form.
But you still want to present them individually to the city council?
Yes, sir.
P&Z and city
I
council?
do.
Okay.
I do. You heard Bryce.
Well, just remember this, Jay, we had 2 items that went on to 1 o'clock. If you put 10 items on that, it would just be a week.
Yeah, but these are supposedly slam dunks.
Yeah.
These are
From
the
a
easy
feeling
ones,
of
that's
lead.
right, these are the easy ones, that's right.
Don't be
Okay.
shocked.
All right, okay. So,
Item 8.
you guys take it to yourselves, but I would like by next meeting to have a document so that we can take it to city
So
council.
that would be, just for the record, that is, Brian Ryder was head of the drainage, and we'll follow his lead.
All right, well, we'll have to get Brian to tune into this discussion so that he can get the right words. But I would love it if one of you two did it, since you were part of the discussion, you have more skin in it.
You don't want to call him as the chair, so you can put all kinds of big pressure on him?
I really believe that
I
would
could do
be-
that. I can
would be
call him.
diminishing Brian's, role if we were to try to do that, Dave.
Try it.
All right, I'll call Brian.
I don't want.
Why don't y'all call him, would you please? Just do it. Take care of this. All right, I think that's all I needed from that item. Does anybody else have any more discussion around drainage? And there's gonna be components to that. There is that recommendation that it is, that we're saying that they ought to have some engineer, city engineer, whatever, be looking at our drainage or our DCM and all that, all that, okay, good, all right, fine.
You know,
Okay.
I just say this, I will tell you, anytime we pass an ordinance like that,
Mhm.
and we get a chance in the future to have it vetted and tested to see if it does what we think it's supposed to do and it's most useful of use of those funds, I think that's a great thing for a city to do.
You're right.
Cause, we never get rid of ordinances. We forget about them, but
Okay.
we've got ordinances that go back forever that cover minor things that really don't have anything to do with anything we're doing today. So,
You could save the city a lot of money, though, by going to other communities and ask to have these things in their ordinance and say, hey, how'd that work out for you?
so we have that, we do have those opportunities, Jay, because I assume that we still do that. It used to be that all the mayors, every quarter, used to be every quarter.
TML or?
No, it was an unofficial deal. The rule of thumb was, it was everything was off record, that all the mayors met, and that's specifically what we talked about. Hey, I've got this problem. Has anybody here had to address that? And then they would tell you how they addressed it, and then we could go get the information from the city as how they did that. I don't know if they're doing that now. There's a lunch, and we rotated the lunch around, but all those, most of the cities participated in Williamson, Hayes, Burnett, and Travis County, and Bastrop.
Mhm.
And it was a wonderful, and that's the whole purpose of that, was to say, okay, I've got this issue. How did y'all address it? So,
Mhm. Good. All right, we good with this? Okay, I'm gonna move on to agenda item number 8, discussion and possible action on enforcement recommendations.
I have to duck out, so don't vote on anything.
Okay. This, I've had some discussion with various members of the city staff about enforcement, and we do have procedures, processes in place where we're using a member of our police department and our building official and so on to be checking on how things are either being followed or not followed with regard to the regulations here in Rollingwood. The question is, could they use a little help in that? And the answer is maybe so. It could, maybe there's more there than what can be done neatly with the staff that we have in place. And maybe there are more things that could be attended to that may be getting not as much attention to them as they could. So I wanted to see, we actually had this in our charter as a possibility. And I wanted to run it by y'all and say, okay, what do we think? Should we make a recommendation? Not so much different from drainage. Is that this CRC thinks that there might be an opportunity here for us to recommend some additional staff support for enforcement. And it's particularly important right now because I think we're in the budget season. And if we made a recommendation to provide additional staff support some way, that maybe it could be accommodated here before for next budget.
David, I gotta tell you, right now, it works this way. Correct me, Nikki. On a new house construction, it gets plenty of attention, wouldn't you say? We have inspectors that go out.
Yes, we have, so you would have eyes on it
Yeah.
through building code, through the ICC, inspectors going out on their called inspections.
Now, we did a deal, we have an ordinance that says that they survey the height. And the city checks that or city engineer checks that. So that's, I think from new construction, we probably have good eyes on a project, I think.
So it all depends on what side of the eyes you're looking at. Like, are you, like, Dave, are you speaking of site enforcement? Are you speaking of building enforcement? Are you speaking of engineering, draining?
I think I neglected to mention that the word enforcement comes up an awful lot in the survey responses. That people, rightly or wrongly, think that the systems are being gamed or the ordinances are being gamed because we don't have enough eyes on it, okay? That we're not looking at it closely enough. That, you know, people aren't building at 35 feet, they're building at 38 feet. So, and again, rightly or wrongly, because of that, and because we did bring it up, or at least it was part of the charter, I thought we should explore it. I don't know necessarily, frankly, I don't know what I'm talking about here. But I do wonder if there is an opportunity here for us to make a recommendation that may not otherwise happen.
Well, let's look at cost to the city. We have an ordinance in place that says that our building permit cost is $1,000. Whatever, it's not $1,000,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's a percent. Let's just say $1,000. If at the end of the day, the city spends $1,500 of cost for that, then we have the right as a city to go collect that other $500. And if we wanted to add something on construction, that's a no cost, that, in theory, that's a no cost to the city. Okay, cause that's gonna be done on that. That's one thing that I think, you know, I don't have a problem about using third party to look at that if we're being reimbursed by the parties involved. Other than that, I think the eyes that we have on infractions are neighbors. And my experience in Rollingwood is, you get told pretty quick whether there's a problem. Somebody's gonna complain. And if they don't complain, there's some violations around my house. It doesn't irritate me. If it doesn't bother me, I'm not gonna complain. So.
I was gonna step in. So Dave,
Please
you
do.
were talking about making sure that code was getting, enforced, that code is, building height is being, met. I think we do address that pretty closely now because we do have that newer ordinance that does require us to get a native ground survey before a demolition even happens or any work is ever done. So if you're going to do a new addition or anything like that. And then in the middle of the inspections at framing, we do charge for a height verification in which we have our surveyors go out and they do a height verification. So we are checking at that point now. And I think that was a good stopgap that council did put in that kind of amended that. And I haven't seen anything really kind of come up since then that has been an issue. But it is, on my end, you've got the ones that are just there approaching that maximum height. And when they go out there and they do that, you're like, oh, it is verified that they are where they're supposed to be. So, anybody can come look at those. Like I said, it just kind of began. We have maybe a handful of them that have now really started the cycle. So,
And David, let me get down to my second point. It's personnel. One of the reasons that I'm more comfortable now than I have been in the past that enforcement's there is because we have personnel that are paying attention to it, and we have an ordinance in place that allows us to do it. Thank you, Nikki, for doing that.
Thanks.
I want to ask about trees.
All right, then, but I want to get to the
Enforcement.
personnel thing a little deeper.
Let me say something before moving to site, because that's where the tree thing's gonna be. But related to the building, height and the complaints in the survey, I think all that gets back to, guess what? We had a floating datum that people were gaming from
Yeah.
the code, the ICC versus what our zoning ordinance said. And that's where the confusion with the public lies in terms of, they violated the ordinance, okay? No, they didn't violate the ordinance, they just figured out a way to get around it. And by what we're doing, I think we're cleaning that up. We're eliminating that unknown.
All right, so on this personnel thing, we have a problem, like every other city has, on finding qualified people to do their inspections. We have an engineering firm that I think is, they're even having problems finding people to do that.
Which type of inspections are you talking
Well, let's just talk about the building inspections
Mhm.
on that.
We use ATS for that. I guess they are an engineering and surveying firm. They have multiple arms, but and I guess I personally haven't heard of, necessarily staffing issues with them. But again, they come to the required survey, required inspections that we
Yeah.
list on there, but they're not there for any additional stuff. So they're not there throughout a project. They're not there watching, it might be a different inspector that comes one day to another. So that is,
So is this just cutting to the chase on this, do y'all need do y'all think y'all need
This is-
dedicated?
That's right, there's an
enforcement
opportunity
officer?
here.
I don't know that enforcement is the key. I think we would maybe want to consider something like possibly having an in-house building official or something like that that would, enforce our code, and they might then have a little more handle on both, in-house our zoning rules and the things that are specific to Rollingwood, and then also the things that are, ICC, international code related. So I think something like that could be explored. I obviously don't know how the numbers would come out, but I think we could get some consistency through that process that maybe we don't have now that might be helpful. I don't know that it's necessarily enforcement, but I suppose if that same person would do all of that. So they would know what's going on from a building perspective. Then when they drove by it the next day and saw something off, they would know, and they could then be able to kind of lead that enforcement.
So this would, right now, we farm out the building plan, building permit, right, process to a large extent, right? That goes to an engineering firm, looks at the building plans, sees whether or not they,
We have
Are
two
in
separate.
compliance.
Yeah, so we have our city engineer. They
Uh-huh.
do our zoning and our drainage. Those are two different reviews that they do that are based on the city's rules.
right.
And then we have ATS that does our building code, that's international building code
So
related.
what you had just described sounded to me like the engineering piece of that. That wasn't right, or?
So that ATS does the desk review and the plan review for
Yeah.
those, and then they also come out and inspect it for international code.
That doesn't really fall under engineering discipline, but they do.
They have
ATS
engineers,
does do
yeah.
engineering as a.
So ATS will actually look at the plans and they look at our codes and see that the height of the building
International
is-
building.
They do
code.
international building code. So it's our city engineer, which is Kay
Safety.
Freese. They currently do our zoning reviews and our drainage reviews, which are more, to our code. And so, but maybe sometimes they're not always together on is ATS reviews the plans for building. KFA does it for zoning and drainage. And then there's not necessarily, ATS isn't looking for that stuff when they're out there doing inspections. And so it can be a little disconnected because they don't know what what Kay Freese approved. They only know what they approved and what they're
Yes.
So
inspecting.
what was it that you were describing here that might be useful? You got those two things met,
ATS.
what was there?
I would think some kind of more of a building official presence that could do a little more of both. That was maybe someone that knew our zoning code in and out and our drainage rules in and out, but also could do those inspections because that would then put them on site ever so frequently during a building process.
They would have to be an engineer to do
I
that.
would probably,
There
or
are
a certified
s-
building official.
And there's pertinent parts of our zoning ordinance that really fit in the building category. And I mean, again, this is a personal gripe, and I'm not gonna make it a big issue, but, you know, the zoning and drainage being processed and reviewed, and then the building being processed and reviewed, and one's gotta go before the other, that, to me, in my world, that's gotta stop.
Sure, it takes a lot of
If we put the
time
right zoning
Mhm.
stuff with the building, then all that could happen concurrent.
at one time. Right, and we used to send them all at once, but what would happen was ATS would approve something, then zoning wouldn't approve something, and they'd have to change it, and then we'd have an approved set of plans from one that looked like one thing. And so the best thing we could
And
come
I
up with was,
understand that.
you know, doing
But
one
if
at
we
a
get the
time.
zoning parts that pertain to the building
Mm-hmm,
and have ATS deal with that.
do that also.
See, I just remember that when Mike Alexander decided that he didn't want to do this anymore, he was our building official.
Mm-hmm,
We put that out for bid, we got no bids.
I think it would be probably kind of hard to find. I think both. I think finding an in-house employee to do it would be hard to find, and I also think finding a company that would do it all
Yeah,
or a consultant would also be difficult. So I'm not saying it would be super, you know, an easy thing to do, but I think there really is some continuity that could be
well,
gained.
we're gonna make recommendations, we don't have to go find them,
Mhm.
they're gonna assign that job to you.
Mhm.
Ask them.
And if you're interested in looking at it, I think, and I will go actually
Those
talk
people
to
are out
West.
there.
I'll talk to Westlake Hills a little bit. They've done something recently like this, where they have gone to more of an in-house. And from what I've heard on the surface, it's going well. I would like to talk to them more about what that entails, what they used to have versus what they currently have.
Would you give it a Sharon maybe?
So
Of course, yeah.
going back to our complaints on the survey, when I talk to people on this survey, what they were talking about is, okay, people gaming the system, like Duke was talking about, which I think we've hopefully plugged those leaks. But the other thing, the big thing was, gee, they're supposed to stop at 7 o'clock, they're not supposed to work on Saturdays or holidays, and they're doing it, and no one is going by and making them stop. Until you call the police, and police do come out
Right.
and do
And
that.
they do it,
But
right.
that's, you know, we don't have an official that's driving around saying, oh, here's a guy working at this house and I need to stop him.
Somebody
think
riding
that-
around in a Prius
We're-
with code enforcement on the door.
And we're gonna have a hard time finding one that would
Yeah,
do the after hours,
Police are doing
right?
that on their normal rounds.
The police are
They're-
doing it pretty
they
well.
don't have to be
Police do a decent job, but they, you know, again, they miss some things because it's cars, they don't see it, they don't hear it sometimes.
You know,
And, but
And,
if
yeah.
people call, they do come out there and enforce it.
Absolutely. Yeah, they
So-
can't sit at every home at 7:01 p.m., but I promise you, if you call them and they're not on a serious call, like, they will show up and they will enforce, and that's
Well,
what we've been
okay,
trying
now
to tell
the
people.
point of this discussion item is to decide whether or not there's anything here to do anything about. And if there is, what is it? And if there's not, well, then we just drop it. So, I mean, it sounds like there's the possibility, the potential for something. Is there merit in pursuing this any further?
I
In
th-
your view?
I think so. I think the word enforcement has multiple meanings to all different people, and when we hear it, we think, oh, we're not showing up at 7:01 every day when someone's still building and it's after hours. So I think enforcement, and then also the way enforcement could have been used is used in different contexts. Sometimes it's, oh, they just don't like the rules, so they say we're not enforcing them. So it's kind of hard to tell what enforcement is. So I don't know if that's the recommendation that I know would be as helpful. Though I think we could always do more enforcement, obviously. But I think it's something more in the lines of, you know, building official continuity, reviews, like looking at our review process. And that's something we're working through in the Development Services Department already. We have a consultant kind of helping us work through what our process is. So I think some support in that area would be helpful.
Okay,
See, I can see, I've thought about this along many years about in-house versus outside. And there's advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantage to having it in-house is if that person is sick,
Nothing.
everything stops. And it's hard for them to catch up again.
Right.
And if they get overloaded, it gets kind of tough. But I don't know that we're getting any better service from everybody else now than that. If we do, then great.
Right. Well, and just to be clear, everyone is delivering the service that their contract says they're supposed to do. Like that's happening, but I don't know that there's been an overarching view on it
Okay.
to determine if it's the best way it can be
Okay,
done.
so, to take this to the next thing, if there's something here, it seems to me that you at least need to start off with a list of things that would be accommodated by whatever this person is, right? You would need that.
Mm-hmm. I think we could list our whole development process.
Could-
That we could do that. The different.
Well, is it, okay, so the way forward would be to have staff do something and then give it to us, or would you like us to participate in a process?
Well, in the end, it's your recommendation. So I guess we would like to know what input you want us to have. Do you want to? I mean, we can set some meetings up and you can meet with us and we can talk through, what our current process is. If that would be helpful, we can just go talk to Westlake Hills and see what they're doing. I mean, we're happy to assist. However, I just don't really know what role you want us to play in that.
As a builder, what would you prefer?
No, I mean-
In-house,
Well, I just think the next logical step is, again, under the title of building official, that there's some liaison between Nikki and ATS. Okay? I
Mhm.
mean, that's maybe a terrible way to state it, but, and again, that person might be involved in plan review, but at the same time, that person couldn't handle the entire load.
Right.
They may need still ATS's support and backup, and,
Mhm.
there might be some overlap in, because of them doing inspections, and yet that person doing some field verification. Again, I don't know exactly how to define it, but I think there's a liaison or sort of gap between Nikki and as much as she can do, and ATS, they can't do everything.
We don't have
Right.
any existing employees, including the police, that could function in that role.
I don't know that would have the the training from like an international code perspective. I don't think we would.
Could
And I
I
don't know.
interject, just something about trees? How I'd like the enforcement of the tree ordinance also to be incorporated into whatever you're doing. And ATS doesn't deal with trees, and the engineering fees or whatever their name is, they don't deal with trees. So, I'd like, if we're talking about enforcement, I'd like to
It
include.
needs to come under the engineers.
And what
My-
so we
My
review
opinion.
tree plans right now. We tell people if they're gonna cut, they submit what they want to cut down. We tell them how much they're gonna have to replace. That gets figured into their plans. Is there?
Do they
additional-
actually mark the trees they're gonna take out?
They do. Yeah, they put on the plans which ones are staying,
They
which
put it on
ones
the
are
plans,
going.
but when the tree people come out there, are they clearly marked which ones they're supposed to take out?
Well,
and which ones-
so we've had that before where obviously a tree company came in and took out one they weren't supposed to.
Yeah,
Those are the kind of things that, again, unless we're literally on site with them all the time, we're gonna have a hard time with those kind of detailed situations. But if there's something that's not being, to the best of our ability right now, we're reviewing the plans. We're making sure that there's planting what they're supposed to. But again, a project might last 2 years, and so it's hard. We can't be on site the whole
Yeah.
time to know if they're gonna.
What's the penalty if I cut down a tree I'm not supposed to?
Oh gosh, I would have to
it's
look.
$500 for
Mhm.
Okay.
per
At this
day.
time.
Now, but we
Yeah.
have the legal ability to raise that to 2,000.
What
I would
it
have to
says is
check that.
500 for the first infraction, and it can be carried over daily if they wanted to, or $2,000 for a malicious
Mhm.
infraction of it.
Right, and we would have to then determine, like, obviously they can't fix it the next day, so it's not something that we can we find them $500 a day every day? Well, the tree's
Well,
not gonna grow back, and so we have
My
to,
experience on the fines is, Jay, that we recommend the maximum legal fine amount.
Mhm.
And let the judge, if they wanna, it's up to that amount,
Mhm.
and the judge can come down. But if you're talking to somebody and you say, all right, look, it's $500 if you cut down these trees, they go, here's your $500.
Right,
Mhm.
exactly.
But now, so
But if it's $2,000 and they can do that every day,
Yeah.
that gets to be a little more of a detriment.
Well, if it's $500 a day until they at least acknowledge their error or their, you know, that they did the wrong thing, and that this is our plan to make it, you know, make it right.
Sure.
Right.
I think though, I mean, the way it is now, I don't know that at this time you can cut down any tree as long as you follow the appropriate procedures. Is that's correct in our code? So just I mean, yes, they would be violating their tree permit if they accidentally cut down the wrong tree or on purpose cut down
Intentionally.
the wrong tree. But like the remedy for that is then you file your permit, you tell us what you're going to replace it with, and we enforce it that way. We also can do the fines. That's absolutely possible. We can send them to court and recommend the highest fines. But in the end, they have the right to do it through their. They can get a permit and they can, you know.
We've had people just go in and clear cut
Mhm.
with no permit, show nothing
Yeah.
today, and just because they were in the way.
Right.
And what was done about it.
I don't know which
They're right.
situation we're
We've got
talking
'em.
about.
That mound of dirt over here,
I mean, there were a lot of citizen comments in the survey about their perception that people were just going in, especially developers, going in, just taking out whatever trees they felt needed to be taken out,
that's happening.
whether it was on the tree permit or not, and just live with the consequences, you know? Well,
Right.
there has to be really significant consequences for our ordinance to mean anything.
That's why I say, whatever when we're talking enforcement on the tree deal, whatever the legal limit is, that's what we should recommend. And then let the judge, the judges will never go to that point.
And the ordinance says per day until it's remedied. And-
Yeah.
Well-
But there's a difference between 500 versus 2,000.
Now, the question is though, who is doing this? Who is the one who is checking to see that the,
If we're made aware of one,
but if
we
you're
are
not
gonna
made
do that.
aware of one, if
That's-
someone is
that's the
actually
problem.
proactive in that.
that's the problem. If we're not made
Yeah.
aware of it, we can't be at every single
So
lot.
once
I'm
they
gonna ask,
clear the
is there
lot,
anything here?
do you
Is
go
there-
out there and,
Yeah.
and check with the tree plan?
According to
that
their,
they-
well, when you say clear the lot, when they
Well,
say,
they
when they
go out
say
and
they've
they
cut down
finish
the
their
trees.
tree
I don't know
cutting
if that's done between the cutting down and the building or at the
No.
end of it, but it's, at some point, that survey is to be trued up with what is
Because
on the
if
ground.
it's done right after they cut the trees down and there's an infraction, you have the ability to stop construction. And that's in the code. And that's a real,
Yeah.
Big hammer.
you know,
I'm sure we
a
can,
big
yeah.
hammer.
I'm sure we can. Again, it's very hard to not speak to specific, like, I feel like a lot of situations are getting thrown at us that we aren't aware of. Like, we need to know about what they are so we can look at them and how have they been done. I mean, Nikki's probably only seen, in her time here, not even one full home go from, down to up, because those take 2 years. And so, it's a process we do need to refine, but again, I mean, we're working within the code we have, and the recommendations you all have made that are gonna be put into the code are stricter, and they're, that's what we'll begin enforcing once it's approved. And so, I mean,
So do we have a thing here or don't we?
what thing?
The thing being, should we be looking at some sort of a staff, increase or some
Tom's telling
staffing
me not to
remedy,
do.
staff remedy that,
Tree specific, I don't know if that's what you mean,
no, not
or in
tree
all, in
specific,
general.
I mean, everything
Yeah.
that's, everything that's not getting done, whatever that
Mhm.
is.
Building official.
I would
Yeah.
suggest that you discuss that with the mayor before you make a recommendation.
Right, and I think that's just what it would be, is CRCRC making, do you see a problem, and if so, tell council, here's where we think there are problems, and leave that to them and us and the mayor to talk about
Okay,
and make a
so
correction,
It could come down to that. Then
It could.
we just say, okay, like
Make
what
a
Jay's saying,
recommendation.
some of the things.
Here are the
that-
blind
that
spots we
that
see.
we think we know is happening. And and people have mentioned them in the survey, and we think that
I agree with that.
there needs to be some sort of enforcement person, whatever, to accommodate those things, and that becomes our recommendation.
Absolutely.
And
I think that
would
sounds
say
great.
A dedicated enforcement, and that may be a police officer who is,
A code
has a little
enforcement.
training
Okay.
on that, and that's okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I really like that approach, because I don't know that I think y'all's charge is to take what the community has told you and what you see happening, and then we can, I support it personally, but we'd have to talk to council
Okay,
about
I'm
the
gonna-
budget.
I'm gonna go back and look
you
at the
know.
survey and see, whenever I see the word enforcement, what it's associated with. That'll be one, okay? And the other thing is that I'm gonna put on the agenda for next time, and you all put your thinking caps on, as to what kinds of things we think that we need to say in a recommendation to go to city council.
All right.
That
I like
without regard to how that would get solved. Is that fair?
I like it. That's a great
Cool.
recommendation.
I'm happy
All
with
right,
that.
all right. So we're gonna add that to our agenda for next time. All right, that's all. Thank you for that discussion. I know it's hard to talk about these things sometimes.
So do we have to make a motion to,
That's a good
Put that on
question.
the
That's a
agenda
good,
next
thank you
time.
for that. Thank you.
No, you just put it on the agenda.
What
what do we do?
do we,
Since we're not at the recommendation phase, you could or could not. You could say we want it on the next agenda, or it could just show up on the next agenda.
why don't you do it, Duke? Why don't you make a
Okay, so we recommend that we place on next CRCRC's meeting agenda a recommendation to consider staff.
No, it won't be staff.
Okay.
Items that need attention.
Okay, items that need attention for full enforcement of building and site-related issues.
I like it. Okay, we have a motion.
I second it.
Second, you got that, Ashley? Are we all, okay, cool. And, all right, any more discussion on this? Very good, all right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed? Ayes carry 4-0. Thank you. Good idea. All right, discussion, we're moving on to agenda item number 9, we still have 20 minutes. Discussion and possible action on driveway recommendation amendment. I brought up, I know this is everybody's favorite, it's actually my favorite, but, I had originally drafted up what I thought was pulling the recommendation, the ordinance that says that you're not allowed to have connecting driveways. Pull that ordinance away. I took that to city council, they said, no, you can't do that. There might be a safety concern. Get together with the chief of police and see whether or not she agrees with that recommendation. I met with the chief, she said, no, we can allow to have driveways that are connecting between two streets, provided that each leg of that driveway is 30 feet or more from the corner. I said, okay, that's easy peasy, great. We wrote that in, took it back to city council. One of the council members came back and said, well, I just talked with a friend of mine who works for TxDOT, and he thinks that's a bad idea. And then all the air came out of the room, and that was it. And I said, well, I'll be back. So I've been thinking about this, and I've been thinking about special exceptions. And I've been thinking about the reason why I did this is because certain families have, I think, a safety need for this because of children that are learning how to drive and things like that. And the fact is, we do have a couple of streets here that are pretty busy. They have some busy corners that do actually present a safety risk that may benefit from this, should somebody want to do it. And right now, the Board of Adjustment their hands are tied, they can't approve it effectively. So,
Well, we have a number of these driveways,
we do, that's right.
and so how did they get here?
Before this, I
No,
did,
we have some new ones.
I wrote myself some notes about this. I went back and looked at all the codes that are in Ashley's office. And this thing doesn't go all the way back to the Stone Age.
Yeah.
Somebody put it in the, I don't know, maybe after 2000. And I don't know why.
Well, I did.
I don't know why it happened. I don't know. No one takes credit for it. But anyway,
You just did.
you put it in there.
I was there when it was put in. I
All
don't
right.
remember why we did it.
Yeah, why'd you do that?
But I can tell you this, since 2000,
Right.
there's houses that have been built with two driveways. Now, either they just did it, or they got approved somehow.
By two driveways, you mean a circular driveway?
Circular
Yeah.
drive.
I haven't seen.
Two curb cuts.
I haven't seen it happen. I've seen it asked for several times since I've been part of this rolling wood business, and I haven't seen it approved once.
You can have two
Oh,
curb
I got
cuts.
one approved a long time, 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
And they didn't execute it until 10 years ago, I bet.
You can have two
You can
curb
have two
cuts.
curb cuts, just as long as each one of the driveways is either 30 or 35 feet from center line apart. But I think what Dave is talking about is circle
Corner.
driveways or
Right.
connecting
Connecting
driveways
two streets.
into streets.
And what is the setback on a corner lot where this might apply?
That's,
It's really only a corner lot, yeah.
yeah,
And what is the
And you're-
setback on those?
Oh, the setback on corner, it's the same on a corner as the front setback, which is 30 feet.
So
30 or
how can you have a circular driveway? It has to be 30 feet.
Oh, you're allowed to have a
From the
driveway in your
corner.
setback.
Mhm.
Driveways,
No,
yeah,
it has to be 30 feet from the corner,
yeah,
the first cut.
That's
for
right.
the- Okay. And, well, I just don't see how
Here-
that would
here's your
impinge in
geometry.
their buildable
okay, you've got
area.
30 feet and 30
Yeah.
feet. Now, how far is that? What's your hypotenuse? More than 30 feet.
Mhm.
Okay.
That driveway might be shaped
And
like
that might be like that, that's right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can do it,
And that's, just the cuts have to be 30 feet from the.
Yeah.
that's right.
Now, again, my question, is it from the actual street corner? You know, or is it property line?
The way that the chief said, that the street, actually, she said,
And that's-
from
it's-
the,
Just as long as we're clear about
from
what
the
it is.
safety sign. You know, like if there's a stop sign there, that I think would become the starting point.
We just need to be clear
I
what
remember
it is.
why we did
Okay.
it.
Now,
And
here's,
again, TxDOT, I mean,
yeah,
you know what, TxDOT has such a bigger focus, at least in my world,
okay,
in getting approvals from them.
well,
You know,
well,
the
this,
residential,
this was my idea. Okay, so I got shot down by city council, so I thought, okay, what if I went back to the chief of police and said, what if you folks say that there is a safety issue here that merits address, and that these people have something of substance that they can argue for. Now, the chief is out, and I talked with our stand-in, Corporal,
Cantu.
I'm sorry?
Senior corporal.
Yes, it's Corporal Cantu, and Senior Corporal Cantu, thank you. And he said that he would go, when he gets a chance, and talk with the chief about this. But he thought that it was okay, that makes sense, that if, that an exception could be granted to this thing, provided that those rules are, the 30-foot rule was followed, and that the police essentially signed off on that there's an issue here that
approve or recommend.
they could be approved. Yeah, right.
If the 30-foot rule is followed, and that's what the police ask for, then why wouldn't they just be able to do it?
Yeah, well, that's what I wanna know, but I'm not gonna win that.
There would also have, it just wouldn't, it couldn't be something that the police could sign off on, you know, a zoning ordinance being not followed. It would have to be, again, objective criteria that go before the Board of Adjustment. I think
And
that would
that's
have to
fine.
get run by
Well, and that's-
legal, but it couldn't, I don't know that we couldn't put something in there that says this is the rule unless the police say it's okay, and then this is the rule. I don't know that that's allowed.
Well,
But
I guess that was where I was headed with it, is if, right now, the Board of Adjustment their hands are tied. Because it says, I mean, the ordinance says you can't do it.
They turned down that particular house
Yeah.
they're talking about. I know which house
Yeah,
you're talking
so,
about.
yeah, well, there's actually two I saw. Anyway, and from my standpoint, I saw no good reason to turn them down, but nonetheless, if we write the ordinance such that at least you can get relief from the Board of Adjustment if certain criteria are met, then, okay, do that. And the criteria would be that the police agree that there's a safety issue here. Now, that can't be,
I don't know. I'm not gonna be
I
able to
would
answer that
never
question.
put our police in a position to be making that judgment, because if there is a accident or fatality there, the police are gonna, they'll be
Yeah.
fried.
And even just the inconsistency of
They're
if
not
they
gonna do
approve
that.
one and not another, or, you know, I mean,
I don't
people
know.
change, so I
Okay.
think that
And
goes
they're not engineers.
precarious.
Now, help me out then, can I, I'd really like to see this thing work somehow. And, it's a family thing, let's face it, it's people raising their kids and they are concerned about their safety. And the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit was a huge help, I think it's been great, but it's not everything. And, we still see a lot of kids out in the street. So,
What if you just say that you can have a circular driveway going from one street to the other as long as the initial curb cut is 30 feet from the,
that was the
corner.
recommendation I took to city council and got
They're
turned down.
not gonna do that.
no, they didn't turn it down, you just said one person said something about text
They
dot.
wouldn't take it. Well, the way I guess it worked, Jay, was she said that, and like I said, the air came out of the room,
You-
and I said, well, what can I do? And they said, well,
Dave,
why
are
don't
you trying to get this to a special exception?
maybe it is.
And if you do that, I'm okay if we have this looked at on an individual basis. And you just say, look, if there is a significant safety, issue,
All right.
then this would be a, basis for granting a special exception to this rule.
Okay. And all I was trying to do was exactly that, but get police endorsement for that.
I would
And you're
never-
saying don't do that.
I wouldn't do that.
I am very uncomfortable about
Okay.
asking our police to endorse
See,
something like that.
that's why we have this collaborative environment that we work in.
Well,
So-
wait a
so
minute.
are
We just have enough pressure on them now.
I was
don't
told
know.
earlier that we are not collaborative, but
Who told you that?
There's a letter, we have a letter right here that says that.
yeah.
So you're saying the recommendation would be to allow curb cuts from street to street if they're 30 feet from the corner, unless a special exception is obtained, et cetera, et cetera.
No, that's the only
No,
way you would be able
That's
to
the only
do
way you're
it.
allowed to do it.
If you allow a curb cut, provided there is demonstrated a significant safety, issue, and then they are eligible to get a special exception.
But then we'd be going against what the police said is necessary
Well,
for
no,
safety.
we can put the 30 feet in there,
Okay.
but that's okay.
That's
They-
all I'm asking is,
Oh, we'll
Yeah.
just do that, we'll do that.
okay.
All right, well, I'll make that motion.
You'll make that motion?
I'll make the motion
Okay.
to that effect,
Okay.
with the 30 feet.
Would you mind reading
No,
it?
I'm not ever
Okay,
gonna do
let's
it
do it,
again. I
okay.
knew you were gonna do that. Okay. That we asked the city council to consider, that.
We're
they-
recommending the city council.
recommending the city council that they allow a special exception to this rule of having from street to street, provided there's 30 feet between the curb cuts, and the applicant can demonstrate a significant safety issue.
It's not 30 feet between the curb cuts. That's when you have
Uh,
two curb cuts on the
From
same
the
street.
intersection.
From the
From
intersection.
the
From the
intersection.
intersection.
Okay.
From intersection corner to approach
Okay,
driveway.
is that good enough?
Okay, now.
You
we have-
worded better than I
Did
can
you get that,
anyway, actually.
did you get that, Ashley?
I'm trying to just, I wanna make sure we're gonna be 100%, so we can go back and listen to the recording and try to, or you guys can restate it one time.
Okay, okay.
Once and for all.
You wanna try it again, Tom?
Do you wanna state what you have and have us fill in?
It is all, it's all over the place. I don't think I typed it all
Okay.
quick enough.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right.
That we recommend that the city council consider allowing a special exception from two curb cuts from street to street, provided that there is at least 30 feet from the intersection corner to each curb cut, and that the applicant can demonstrate a significant safety issue.
Okay?
I'm waiting for Jay to go.
Go ahead, wait, it's your turn.
Significant.
It's your turn.
Oh, significant. I'll
Bring
accept
up
it.
significant.
Significant.
You'll second it?
I'll second it.
All right.
As
Okay,
is.
okay, we have a motion, right? Ashley?
Yes,
All right,
yes, sir.
okay. We have a second. Any additional discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes carry 4-0.
And I don't know where the second house is, but I know where one of them is, Dave.
Yeah, there.
And I'm trying to remember
The one
what I-
across the street from me is one.
One of the concerns
Yeah.
that I remember back from 2000 was that these driveways would be used as shortcuts, cutting through people's driveway from street to street. I just remember that.
All right, we are approaching the 7 o'clock hour. We can take another one on, or we can, if someone wants to make a motion, we can pick
Could we,
these things up.
number 12, do we need a lot of discussion about that?
No, not really. If, we take, why don't we, thank you. Let's do that. I'm gonna take the discussion to regular agenda item number 12, discussion on participation in the codification process, which is about to get underway. We do have a couple of things that city council will approve regardless of how bad I did that. They are still gonna go forward, or some of them will, and, we're going to be getting involved with our legal, advisors on how to go forward with those things, with the wording. Who would like to participate in that process? I know I'm going to be.
I would volunteer to participate in the codification of the tree ordinance.
No desire.
No desire, okay?
I'm just not sure of the timing that I have. I'm
Okay.
still got some personal things I have
Okay.
to do, but
All right.
I assume Bryce is doing this?
Bryce or someone from Charlie's firm. This being legal, he's the planning arm, so probably they'll hunt it to him.
Okay.
Yeah, he'll start first and then go back to, well, they do it conjecturally.
Kind of depends, how
Okay.
the process will take.
I will participate where I can, but I
Okay.
can't be, I don't.
I'm pretty much on call. I don't have any vacation scheduled for a while, so I'm around.
I recommend that
And you're gonna be
we,
back in a couple of weeks.
Hey,
Yeah.
I recommend Brian Ryder.
we
I'll start
strong
this week.
arm Brian Ryder is
Yeah,
where I
well,
was going.
teach him to be here to protect his own interests if you don't show up. So I think Brian would be a good one to
Brian
be
would
on
be
that.
great.
and he
I'll
was-
ask Brian if he'd like to join.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's fine. All right?
And I can do things when I'm gone by email if it's a matter of
Okay.
reviewing some written language.
All right. Yeah, I don't know what the process is. I've never done this before. So, but yeah, to the extent that we can include you, I would like to.
Okay.
Okay.
And I think just because it's still an active committee, I guess it would have to be less than a quorum at this time, because it will be a lot of, meetings off the record. So
That's
I
fine.
suppose that that's the case, that it would have to be a quorum if you were.
Whatever worked for the comprehensive, strike force.
Well, believe it or not, we did that with, we gave them several different sections. They came back as they came back with a section and wanted to visit with that, with recommendations. So,
Right, and there are two right now with them, and one is the trees and one is the building height recommendation. So those are the two that they'll be drafting up in the coming weeks, and that will go, sorry, I should probably speak from the microphone. And that will go to our public hearing on September 4th, assuming that P and Z and City Council both can get a quorum for that day.
and the second thing, I'll
I
just
don't
tell
mind
you,
being
Bryce
at
is,
those meetings. I'm just not
interesting
gonna
to
have a
work
lot.
with, and he's,
Okay.
he may come up with some thoughts that we missed, cause I think he did with us, on the other
Sure.
two groups I've been
Sure,
involved
why
with
not?
him on, and made some recommendations that I think, some of which we took, some of which we did today.
He's a bright boy. Yeah,
Well, he does this for
Yeah.
a living,
why not?
and
Right. Okay, folks, we left just a couple of items, and they're toughies, so I don't really think we need to get into them yet. And if anybody's got a motion to adjourn, I'm
I'll
willing to
make
hear it.
that motion to
Okay,
adjourn.
okay. Motion to
Second.
adjourn.
You have a
I
second?
second
there?
it.
Second, all right. Here we go. It's 7:02.
All those
And I
in
vote
favor?
to
Call this
adjourn.
meeting
We're all in
adjourned.
favor.
Aye.
Aye. I call this meeting adjourned.